Ladies and gentlemen, this is the second part of our interview with Alison Greene from It's Up to Us. Go check out her Substack. Thank you guys so much.
Before we move on to the other things, and I'm also dying to just talk about the on the boots, on the ground investigation.
Yeah,
Can you put up those other two graphics, the
I can.
second one first?
Here's
Okay.
that one. So what is this?
Yeah. So what this is that I was tracking the numbers, but Florida has a clear deadline, which is that voting registration closes on October 7th in
Okay, so
2024.
we've got here
The
a
8th
couple entries
through the
before. Oh, yeah,
No, the 8th is after the deadline.
right after.
So
Okay.
all of this is after the registration deadline passed. There were still people registering, and you can't see it on this, but I believe it was the 9th. The registration for the Republicans was the highest it ever was.
So it
You
was
had
going up.
well, both of these are still following the same pattern, pretty much the 0.01% up for Republicans and others, and down for Democrats and MPAs. And I have to change that graphic, by the way. But what I also noticed is that there were more people registered. The single biggest day for registrations for Republicans was on October 9th, 2 days after the registration deadline. So this is already kind of odd. But can you go to the next one real quick?
Yep. So what
This
I'm understanding is you said that the cutoff was the 7th.
October 7th. And
And yet,
so,
so what
yeah,
we would expect to see, right, is if it was the cutoff and there was an upcoming election, why would you register right after the cutoff, right? There's no election for you
correct.
to be engaged in for the next
2
however
years.
long. 2 years. Yeah, there you go.
And so that was already, and I'm going through it quickly, but there's a little bit more in the article, in the post. But what I'm talking about in the upcoming post is going to be that even after election day, the numbers kept going.
Kept
And
going. So
pattern was completely the same. But this is what I wanted to point out to you. One of the single biggest days for Democrats, so actually not one of the, so the single biggest day for the Republicans was 2 days after the registration deadline. So assuming that that shouldn't make a difference if they were following the law. But if they actually were not following the law, and you and I have found a lot of places in Florida where they're not
well, we'll
following
talk
the
about
law,
that here in a moment. Yeah.
but they could show up at the polls. Early voting started on October 21st, and those Republicans could show up and be in the voter rolls if the cutoff wasn't being watched. Now, what happens is the largest single day where Democrats were actually added to the voter rolls was after Election Day. And
Interesting.
yeah, I actually met with the supervisor of elections, the head of the voter registrations, and with the IT people. And I showed them the spreadsheet and I said, "Can you explain that?" And they said, yes, we can. They said, "We had a lot," and this is now me as a citizen. So I'm not reporting this as a journalist. I'm just
This is what
bringing,
you remember them saying.
which was that they said we had large numbers of people showing up through early voting and after on election day saying that they were actually registered to vote, but we could not find their voter registrations in the rolls. So, and to their credit, I
So let me,
totally agree with this statement, but hold
yeah,
on, they said legally, if somebody shows up and they're not registered to vote, we can't allow them to
they
cast
can't vote.
a ballot. They can't vote. So what I'm actually pointing back to is that when we're told that the Russians could alter the voter registration data, that is how they suppress votes. If they have altered the data, then these people who are showing up and saying, I registered, and the supervisors are saying, well, we can't find your registration, so we can't allow you to vote. There's not much they can do to prove that they were registered at that point, and
Wait,
so they're
so
denied their vote.
let me get this straight.
Yes.
So if this is a malicious compromise of the voter registration systems, and I, as a malicious actor, target the Democrats and I remove their ability to vote prior to the election, and I, mess with the registration, maybe add in voters that I want, maybe, what, it doesn't matter at that point. If I maliciously remove your ability to vote right before the election, there is nothing you can do to vote. You're not allowed to vote by law, even if it was illegally removed. And you're saying the effect we were seeing is that people showed up to vote, could not vote, and had to register right after the election. And I recall the same effects being raised in other places across the US. Pennsylvania, Center County, I believe, had people on the ground saying the same thing, where there was local college students where they show up to vote and they're not registered and
Or
they
people
can't
are
vote.
told that they already voted when they hadn't.
Right.
Those are all ways that by altering the voter registration data, you are actually starting to minimize the vote for a preferred party. And what I can tell you is that the numbers support this, because I then saw this surge of Democrats who were showing up, who were being registered in the days and weeks after the election.
After the
And I
election.
was told it's because they showed up thinking that they could actually register.
Now I
And
have a
they,
question for you,
sure.
and then we'll jump into the on the ground.
I
So
had to get all of that out. Sorry.
no, I'm sorry. What else did you have?
No. Those three, I thought it was important to
Yeah, no,
show
that's
you
great.
the before registration
Yes.
deadline, after registration deadline, but before the election day,
Yep.
and
And then after the election.
post election day.
It
So go for it.
so
Yeah.
so to summarize, it brings up the concern if there was a malicious compromise, the effects we're seeing would be the effects you were seeing if you were maliciously removing people. The thing that we don't talk about too much then is, are we concerned? I mean, we're concerned now, but if you can delete voters of certain demographics, if you can change stuff, well, can you not make voters?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's the thing we're going to talk about now.
Yes.
So really, I'd like to summarize for everyone what were the initial concerns before we did the on the ground investigations, right? So we had the active voter registration database for St. Lucie County
Mhm.
right after the election. So we knew who voted and where they lived, right? So what were some of the main flags we started finding, you found, and then we actually went and looked at?
Okay, so I want everybody to understand the pressure was on because Nathan was flying to Florida so that, because I said to you, come see, let's test this out. I had actually done some door knocking myself and I had started to see some of these irregularities, and I just really wanted to go with you. So when you said, yep, I'm doing it, I'm getting on a plane, I'll be in Port St. Lucie, I was like, oh, okay. I better have some things to show
It
him.
better be good, right?
I better make it worth your while. So, what I actually did was I started looking at some of the precincts where we knew that things were off. And I started with, there were four in particular, but one precinct, um, of those four was one where, according to the numbers, we had 14 active registered voters based on what the state had put in their official records. But I had a public records request and I got the voter registration reports from straight in the system, and that same precinct, which was supposedly had 14 active voters, it actually had 30 voters. And so the state records didn't match the county's registration system.
I
And
think we've
then,
brought this up a few times where why would the systems have two separate numbers in two different places? Why is the county tracking something different than the voter registration, company, right?
yeah, I'm not sure that I can actually explain it that well here. So I'll put that one aside for the moment.
That'll be for some follow-ups, right?
That'll be, I want to think on that one a little bit before going in there. But what I can tell you is that the county records also showed, and one of the reasons we picked this first precinct to go to was that the county records showed that there were 23 votes cast and counted in this same county that the state said only had 14 voters. So you supposedly had 14 voters, but you had 23 votes counted.
More votes
More
than voters.
votes than voters, okay? And just to be clear, that one was very straightforward. That was the overall. There were only 14 voters and there were 23 votes. If you got down to a granular level, then in this county as a whole, there's 35, I think it was. Yes, 35 out of 61 precincts
That
had
had,
more votes for the president than they had voters.
yeah,
So,
that's just one of the things. I think what people really want to hear about
oh, so
is, let's talk about
the door
the
knocking.
let's talk about the first location we went to. So set the stage. What
Okay.
happened? How did you
So
choose that address?
So I looked at those four particular precincts, and that particular address happened to be nearby me, and I happened to know that it was under construction and it was a golf club community and a gated community, but it was still under construction at the time of both the registration deadline of October 7th, and it was also under construction at the time of the election. So what I did was I pulled up out of that was the precinct that had the 14 voters
Right.
but 30 votes, and I looked at some of the voters and I started to search the property records, and I found a number of places where the house was not completed at the time of construction. So when you got into my car, I
Yeah.
handed you the folder,
So
and
why
we
is that a big deal, by the way? Why, like, just lay it out there. Why is it a big deal that the house was under construction during that period when you would have to register? So,
Okay, so before I was a writer and involved in politics, I also was a real estate professional. And I know that until you have a certification, an occupancy, a COO, a certificate of occupancy, until the building department has actually declared this is an occupied house, you can't even get mail, okay, delivered to
right.
a place that's under construction. And I know from having worked with developers, you can't even sell the place. So here it was. And I think that when you and I were talking, it was like, how do you actually even like register to vote at an address that doesn't even exist yet? I mean, you're supposed to be able to show proof of residency. So I grabbed the folder, I had my sticky notes, and we pulled up to the very first place. We knocked on the door, and why don't you take it from there?
Yeah.
Ethan?
So, to be honest, door knocking is a terrifying experience.
Yes.
And almost every house in that area has some type of security system or camera. So,
They
but
were
yeah,
pretty fancy houses too.
yeah, they're very nice. It's a nice neighborhood. So
Yes.
we go up to the door, me and Allison. I think I've got a clipboard and a hat on, so I look more like, type of, a local, you know,
Mhm.
someone you would expect to knock on your door and ask about elections.
Mhm.
And knock on the door. A very nice couple opens the door,
They were
and
really
we
nice.
say,
Yeah.
"Say again."
They were really, really
They
nice.
were
Yeah.
really nice. And we say, "Hey, um, we're going around, I don't remember the exact wording, but we're pretty much like, hey, we're going around canvassing or looking at last election results and stuff. And we see that um, your husband voted in the last election. He's registered to vote here and he cast his vote in St. Lucie County. Could you tell us a little bit about that?" And they say, "Oh, well, that's weird because we didn't live in St. Lucie County during the last election, the 24 November election. We actually lived in Palm Beach." And I think, as you said, what she said is it was actually they had a celebration for the husband because that was the first time he's voted. So they had a little party for him when he cast his vote
They
in the
were all
last election.
clapping and standing up
Yeah.
for him, and that was so sweet, actually. But yeah, it didn't
And
really.
then we said, "Hey, are you aware that on the record it shows that not only was he registered to vote here, but he cast his vote here in St. Lucie County from this address?" And they looked I mean, the response was pretty much that can't be possible.
Mhm.
Let's call the county. Let's figure it out. And that was the first door we knocked on.
Absolutely.
And it got a little crazier from there. But
Yeah,
as
so
we said,
and so
yeah,
these people, just to clarify, it just sounds as though they very legitimately both cast their votes. The husband and the wife cast their votes in Palm Beach County. But and this is where I it's also really weird because I've also gotten you can get CDs basically from I don't know if they're CDs or whatever they are, discs from the state with all of the data registration, and it shows them having voted in Palm Beach. But that's where I know, like, part of me was like maybe their records were brought over, but it doesn't show that the wife voted in St. Lucie County,
just the
just
husband.
the husband.
And and that wasn't the only issue we found when I visited. So what were the other like two major places we went to? And then we'll kind of like,
Yeah.
wrap up.
Okay, yeah, because so the next place I had to take you was because this is the Phantom Precinct.
So explain what that means real quick, because we know what it means, but on the numbers, why is it called the Phantom
The Phantom
Precinct and what's going
Precinct,
on here?
because no matter how many times I perused the state documents, they have the precincts broken down into like point
Yeah,
one or
like a
point
full number and a half number,
full
like
number to a
19.5.
exactly. And I believe it was either 89.3 or 89.4. I think it's 89.3. And I could not find this precinct anywhere in the state records, but the county records show that there are 5 people in this non-existent, so what we called a phantom precinct. And interestingly enough, all 5 of the registered voters in that phantom precinct that does not actually
Doesn't
exist in
show up on the books, right?
records,
Yeah.
they all had the same address, but 2 or 3 of them it was really funny because, like, I know sometimes you use for an apartment number, you use APT, sometimes you use unit, and there were of the 5 voters that were registered, it was the same address, but 2 of them said an apartment number, 1 of them said a unit number, and 2 of them just had that address. So, we pull up to that address and
Yep.
go ahead, Nathan. What did we
Yep.
find?
So, and she was like, "It's really interesting. I wonder what this is," and she'd already told me. We pull up, and it is a UPS store with just UPS at the top, and then there's a second story that it looks like, and it has like a facade. I don't know how you pronounce it.
A facade.
Facade.
A facade.
Facade.
Ye
Blue. I think it's blue facade, and it looks like windows. And I'm like, all right. I look over. I'm like, okay, wait up. Maybe there's people living on that second story. Let's go in and talk and ask them. So we
yes.
walk in, we walk in, open the door. Yeah, it was pretty busy too. So we had a bunch
Yeah.
of people waiting behind us and in front of us. And we go up to the desk. We're like, hey, we're here, looking at registration information for the last election. Are there any residents like on the second floor? Does anyone live here? And what was the response the gentleman said to us? I think he said,
He I think he actually said he laughed and said, "Yeah, nobody lives here." And I think we said, "Is there anybody upstairs?" And he goes something like, "Well, that would help with the rent, but
oh
no."
yeah. So they
And
there was
sorry,
no one
guys,
there.
I know I'm laughing, but it was just such a
It
bizarre
was
experience.
it's
This is
just
not funny.
yeah.
Like, this is not funny, but it was just so bizarre in those moments that we just kept going, and the data is just not
Yeah,
matching
and
reality.
I mean, and I asked, "Hey, can I talk to your manager?" They're like, listen, like, there's nothing here."
Oh, no, he
And
said I was the manager. I am the
phew,
manager,
I think I
yeah.
was so blown away at that point. But so that I was like, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I think as we talked about by law, they're not allowed to use a PO box as their primary like residence. They have to have a primary residence separate to that type of
And
thing, anyways.
yeah, and
But it was a
here
residential
I
address.
wanna make sure that I'm clear about this. So there's about 2,000 post office box lists listed in St. Lucie County. Of the 242,000 active voters, about 2,000 are PO boxes. And I think that you can legally use a PO box as long as you have a residence, but the thing that was unkosher about this particular phantom precinct beyond the fact that it was just a phantom, that it was a phantom and didn't
Yeah.
show up in the books, was that they didn't give any other contact information. So therefore, there was almost no way to track these people down unless we stake out the UPS store every single day.
Well,
We'll never find
that's
these people.
well, the thing is, that's if these are real people. And I think that's
Yes.
what we're starting to ask. And we'll have one more example. And this was the other big one, right? So we went to
Okay.
a boat marina, right? What flagged the boat marina for you? You saying the same thing, right? Multiple active registered voters in one
At least 15 registered voters at one address. And I was
address.
like, either this is a really, really, really crowded house or there's something going on here. So we want to check it out. And so, yeah, go ahead and tell
Yeah.
them about the boat marina.
Yeah. Pull up to a boat marina. My first thought was, well, maybe there's people living on houseboats here, right?
Yeah.
Maybe people can do this. I don't know the law at that point. I'm still a
Yeah.
little confused, but maybe it's plausible. So we go all the way to the back and go to the shop, or the little
The office,
the
the
store, the
management
office, yeah.
office. Yeah.
And when we go in, and there's a very nice lady in there, and we're
She's
like,
really
hey,
cute. Yes.
yeah, they're all very nice. Everyone's, I mean, but we pretty much say, hey, we're here, we're looking at voter registration for the last election, a little bit of an introduction, and then we said, so we have this list of active voters that are registered to vote here. We wanted to ask if you know who these people are, if they have boats here, if they live here, if they're getting mail here, and could we go through the list with you? And she said, oh, of course, let's do it. And
I'll stop you right there though, because I think that one of the first questions we asked is, does anybody live here? And I remember her kind of laughing and saying something like, oh God, I hope not. And it wasn't that classy. I mean,
it was just a boat. Yeah, it was a boat marina.
it was just a boat marina. It didn't look like where people were living there, and we
I
didn't
didn't
see
see any
any
super
signs
yachts.
post
I didn't see any super
or
yachts.
houseboats or anything. So she kind of laughed and said, "Oh God, I hope not." But then we went through all of that. So yeah, keep going with
Yeah.
the
I mean,
list.
we had a long list. I don't remember the official numbers. We had papers. We actually read the names off and filled them out. But I believe, I don't know the official count, but it was a substantial amount of those active registered voters. She did not know who they were, or they did not live there, or they may have lived in adjacent counties and left the county. So it just brought up the concern of, why are all of those people showing up as having voted and having been registered in one address? And is that indication of a bigger problem?
Yeah, and just to go through the numbers, I'm pretty sure it was 15 voters who were registered there, and I want to say it was about half that she knew the names of, half she didn't. And of the half that she knew, some of them she said, "Oh yeah, he moved, a couple of years ago, or he lives in the next county now, so he doesn't house his boat here anymore." So she might have known them, but it didn't mean they were there. And of that boat marina where there were 15 registered voters, the county record showed 11 votes were cast and counted from those people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that
So
yeah,
the
are those real voters?
the question we get now is, or I guess the question we have as we do this investigation and we proceed forward, is, if there is a compromise of the voter registration system, and you are not only deleting voters, which we've shown the records are showing a noticeable decrease, which is flagging some concern. You didn't mention this, but you've put this in your report. There's going to be a lot more that you make public as we go forward. But I think one of the things you mentioned a lot is there was removed active voters from St. Lucie County. What was the number on that?
Yeah, so I'll go through the numbers real quick. The official records from the state were showing that there were 242,966 active registered voters. So when I asked for the county report of all active registered voters, I expected to get
Right.
242,966.
From your information request.
But from the public records request, I got the full list of active registered voters, and it was 217,625. So, and I'll just do real quick math. So if I get anything wrong, please don't shout me out.
I
But
don't do
um,
math live. That's,
I
you know,
know I'm taking a real risk here, but I think that it wound up being that there were approximately 25,319 who were not accounted for. But there are very strict laws about taking people off the rolls. And we were able to identify about 1,000 people that were showing up on the state records as having been removed from the active registered voter list, which left approximately 24,300. And I will tell you right now that when we did the math, it wound up being that 10.08% of the voters were not accounted for. So when US intelligence in 2018 said, okay, they can take out 1 in every 10 voters, the public records requests in
we're seeing,
2024,
yeah.
we're seeing 1 in 10 voters unaccounted for.
Yep. And as you said, there's no paper trail that shows why those were removed. They should have
Which
been
is illegal
documented.
because
Right.
it absolutely, both
They
by
have to document them.
federal and state law, they have to keep records. I mean, how do we audit something if you have
Yeah. There's no,
10% of the voters
yeah.
just vanished and there's no records?
So we've got, as you said, we've seen time and time again data that suggests that there was removal of voters. We've, as we talked about on the ground, we've seen instances of potentially voting for people who may not actually be eligible to vote, may not be in the counties, may not exist. We don't know. And as we've talked about, the voter registration data changes raise red flags for not being, potentially not being humans that are actually interacting with the system, and changes are occurring that are just too consistent. And it just brings up the concern of what can we do about it, right? What can we, where can we go from here?
And let me just be clear. So I mentioned the 1 in 10 vanishing voters, which is an example of deleting voters. But the voter registration numbers that I showed you on those graphs, it was actually showing that 0.01% were being added and 0.01 were being deleted. And the massive number of registered voters happening after election day, according to the supervisor of elections, was because they showed up and their
They
votes,
were removed
they
or
they were
weren't eligible.
removed.
Yeah.
So we've got examples of adding, deleting, and altering data, which is exactly what was warned
Which
about.
was exactly what they said the capability of the malware was in their
And
investigations.
yes. So what can we do about it?
Yeah.
So
What's next?
okay. So first of all, you've been teasing it, but I'm so excited to be working with you on lawsuits. And we're still working strategically on how to maximize what we do legally. But I think there's so many other things that we can do. And part of the reason we're exposing all of this is because we want, we, I think that this is something that is not necessarily in the public consciousness, and people are not recognizing how voter registration records can be so crucial to potentially election outcomes. And I think it's a case of once you know what to look for, you're better equipped to look for it. And we've talked about a number of different ways that we're hoping to roll out actions that people can start to look for these anomalies and issues prior to 2026 so that we can protect our elections going into the midterms, as the midterms are happening, and directly after. That
Yeah,
would be
I think the main thing is as things progress, um, as you said, there's initiatives that can be had to do this types of investigations all over the place. So I know it's up to us. Your Substack, you've got a website. I think you'll have up eventually, um,
eventually, yes.
and that's how people who want to be engaged in helping do that level of the work can go and support the ETA. We're going to keep putting out. We have, as I mentioned in this, we have a second look at the registration info that you've brought up, right? You talked about changes. Well, we've mapped those changes and we have visuals for them to show is it weird or not. But also not only that, right? We've got the same type of statistical analysis flagging the same concerns,
Mhm.
and pending legal action, both for, Florida, as you said. We'll figure out the best ways to leverage that. But there is other legal action that the ETA is conducting elsewhere that will be hopefully public very soon. And I feel like the thing that most people need to be ready for as we
Mhm.
go forward, right, is if there's a compromise of our systems, which everything we have at this moment, everything we've made public and everything we've not made public, both on your end, on my end, the ETA, it all points to a serious concern that the systems are compromised, that they have been used to change outcome of elections in certain places, if not, across the board, and that we cannot rely on these systems going forward without investigations and change. So, really, my call to action, I think your call to action as we go forward, is we need investigations. We need
Absolutely.
we need the states in other places. If you're using these systems, right, as you've called out, um, a lot of the other states use some of the same systems Florida is using. And if they're using those systems, and the ETA at this point, we've reached out independently and we'll keep reaching out to some of these state officials with data, private information, and analysis we've not made public. We send them directly to the governor and secretary of state or the attorney general. I hope that as we go forward, that some of these states are going to come to the table and
Mhm.
help do these investigations in their own areas. And then it's going to get much easier to understand not only did this happen, but what can we start doing about it, and how can we start preparing right now for the midterms and intermediary elections, because we can't wait much longer to investigate, and we can't wait much longer to start doing something about it.
So many people, that's such an important phrase. So many people say we have to do something. And that's why we created It's Up to Us. We're starting by rolling out this information, and we're so excited to be kind of partnering with you on it. It's very new for all of us, but it's not up to ETA. It's not up to It's Up to Us. It's up to all of us together. And like, I know we both work with Lulu and Smart Elections. Like, it's going to take all of us coming together. And so, one of the things is we're currently looking for volunteers also who can help us with rolling out with these actions to protect our elections. There's just so much that has to be done. So, we're starting by exposing the problem, because until you understand a problem, you can't solve a problem. But then we're not stopping at the exposing, but we have to all get onto the same page. Then we
Yeah.
can be strategic about how we take actions and where we take action. So, if I may,
Yeah.
because our website is not up yet, if anybody wants to reach out to us, um, we have an email address. It's up to us at grassrootsspeak.com. So if anybody wants to volunteer or help to build the investigative arm of what we're all doing, I work with ETA regularly. We're all kind of building resources to protect the midterms. So please feel free to reach out to us. It's up to us at grassrootsspeak.com is the email. And then the reality is the voter records. I was investigating for a full year, and it's way too much. This is not something you can disseminate in one headline, in one article.
Yeah.
So we're rolling it out strategically because it's a complicated story and we want people to follow along. So we've just started posting. Um, I want to make it clear the first two, there's almost so much to this investigation that we did an overview in the first two posts. This past week, we put in our third post, but that's actually the start, and it has some of the registration numbers, and we're taking you through all of the information for the weeks to come. So
Episodes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like an episodic thing, and
Yeah.
so please, subscribe to the Substack at itsuptous.substack.com. It is free, although if anybody can become a paid member, it helps to fuel the
The
investigation
investigations. Yeah.
and the actions that are to come. But also, just subscribing allows you to see when we drop our next thing. And please, we kind of touched on it, but it's so hard to get the word out about the elections and what's really going on. So share I was on Jessica Denson's thing. We're sharing Jessica's videos, share Nathan's ETA videos, but also come on to the Substack and share our posts, because we need to have an army of citizens to help spread the word, because social media is maybe working against us
A little tough right now. But yeah, we'll have it's my goal as well to, this won't be the only time we have this conversation. There'll be more stuff we'll cover. You've got more to release with your episodes. DT has got more data to release. And really to close things out, I think you keep bringing it up. We're going to keep hammering this home. We can't just bury our heads in the sand and say, well, the people can't just be like, oh, we'll get them next time, right?
No.
It has to start right now. And the only way we're going to know if there's a problem is to investigate it, to figure out what the problem is, and then you can make effective change. So here we are. Perfect opportunity. What do they say? The best time to start is right now. So
A
thank you.
year before the midterms too.
Yeah, it's a year before the mid. It's felt like a year. That's for sure. But thank you so much. As I said, we're gonna have some awesome stuff in the near future, and you're amazing. And I will, have we'll have some fun with the whole legal stuff as we progress. So thanks so much, Alison, for
Thank
covering
you
everything.
so much for having me, Nathan. And it's been a pleasure working with you for these 8 months. And I can't wait to start showing everybody all the good work we've been doing.
Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a like, a comment, and thank you guys very much. More to come.